And welcome to the Moriah Nightly News on this Wednesday evening, June 3rd, 2026. From the nation to Moriah, here are tonight's top stories. Today in Congress, the House voted in favor of halting or stopping military action in Iran. This came to us this afternoon as I was preparing my notes for tonight's broadcast. This was after a handful of Republicans joined the Democratic side and jumped ship. And House Speaker Mike Johnson had attempted to prevent this outcome, as he had done 2 weeks ago and at least two times prior, but could not do so today. A final vote was 215 to 208 in favor of ending the war, or at least curtailing some of the president's war powers, and met with cheers in the House chamber. Democrat Hakeem Jeffries obviously heralded it as positive and called it a reckless and costly war of choice. That was his phrasing, a reckless and costly war of choice. And I would again note the rather ridiculous and quite honestly stupid phrasing of that, given that, as I have stated, this is not a conflict that occurred in a vacuum, but has been a 50-year-old foreign policy problem for decades with presidents of both parties. But in any case, that's where his intelligence level is. So this was the fourth time that such a vote had gone through. And this will not, of course, be the end, because it has to go through the Senate and then hit the president's desk, and with a veto, it would likely not pass. And then, of course, Congress would ultimately have to override the veto by 2/3 majority in both houses. They are nowhere near that level of cohesion at this point. And there's also a Democratic-led, according to the Associated Press, a Democratic-led effort to block U.S. action in Lebanon and to authorize U.S. support for Ukraine, for operations in Ukraine. That, to me, seems rather hypocritical, given that you want to support one and not the other. They'll support Biden's war, but won't support Trump. And not only their hatred of Trump, but their demonic hatred of Israel, as I have noted, and you can go back and watch previous broadcasts of that, but their absolute refusal to do anything sensible at this point is noteworthy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, said that this would likely hinder negotiations with Iran if it meant that Iran could see or saw that they could get away with it, essentially, without further repercussion of military action. So that is interesting to note, especially with opinion divided in Europe, as we had mentioned. I believe that was last week, maybe the week before. I'm not quite sure when that was. But I know that previously I had ran that piece noting the division in Europe over support for Ukraine, with countries like France and Germany being hesitant to send the money over there that they sent the last time. So with divisions in European opinion, it seems rather odd that the Democrats would just jump on board like that, but it just goes to prove my point. Israel is... Give me, I have to be a producer and check all my stuff here. But Israel is making headway and they are advancing anyway, taking a what the Wall Street Journal called it appeared to be some type of castle from the Crusader era that they have not held in over a quarter century. Significant that they are taking ground. Prophetically interesting, as I have tried to note in the early stages of this programming, some of what's going on in terms of biblical prophecy there in that region. That, of course, you can follow up on our separate End Times series for that. But they are currently, Netanyahu and Trump are going back and forth in some level of disagreement over how to end the conflict, with Trump more or less wanting a diplomatic deal at this point that would favor American interests, and Israel feeling that Netanyahu's hands are tied essentially by American interests because they want to get the job done. And that, to me, would also fly in the face of any kind of claim that Netanyahu is the one pulling the strings when, at this point, both sides and both leaders are disagreeing over what to do with the Iranian problem. Again, a problem that has existed for 47 years now since the current religious government in Iran took power. So that will all be stuff that we will be watching by Friday and the end of the week, with the congressional vote happening literally just this afternoon as we were preparing notes, as I was preparing notes for this broadcast. And it was a breaking news headline, so I'm sure that more analysis will be given in the days ahead, and more information will come. Not only more information, but we'll see what the president's response will be to all of that on that front. So that is where the bulk of the national headline, or that was the major headline on the national levels. Watching also the midterms, not that I put it on the script, but with some of the Democratic candidates there, that will be forthcoming, as I am not able to recall his name off the top of my head, the guy from Maine. Anyway, that's what happens when you don't write things down at my age. Not that I'm that old. Anyway, our top story is more on the renewable energy projects happening in our region from both the state and local focus on these issues tonight. Many of you probably saw the picture that was posted, and that is in no way an attempt to attack anyone here locally, because the issue is never about anyone locally. It is always the corruption in Albany and the broader focus of the policy of renewable energy that is our focus here in this piece. So I did call once again the Adirondack Park Agency, and they directed me to their media representative. So I am awaiting comment from them directly, but they were not very swift in answering that call. They did not get back this afternoon, so hopefully by Friday's broadcast we will have that extra bit from the Adirondack Park Agency on their willingness to greenlight both the lithium battery storage project and the solar panel that are cropping up all over the region. Research on the solar panel came through a few different sources. The Harvard Business Review in 2021 published an article called "The Dark Side of Solar Power," noting problems in particular with disposal and the costs to repurpose or recycle the panel being at $20 to $30 a panel versus about $1 to $2 a panel. I think a mere $1 to $2 was their language to just take it and put it in a landfill, and how that would factor in with their 30 years. They're about 30 years in use, but the article noted that usually with rebates and whatnot, folks don't usually wait out that 30-year period, giving a hypothetical example that if citizen A, I think they used Mrs. Brown or something like that, installed their panels in 2011, by 2026, halfway through, they would be ready to junk it now because of all of the rebates and the cost being significantly less, say now, than it was in 2011. And so they're not even really hitting that 30-year lifespan that they're guaranteed for. And there are questions over the more or less the infrastructure in lands, which seems odd to say infrastructure in landfills, but infrastructure in landfills and recycling programs, how to dispose of them with their chemicals, having these heavy metals in this materials, which would be cadmium and lead, very lead heavy. So that requires, because governments would put this under hazardous material for disposal, it requires specialized handling, training, transportation, and pretty much at every stage of disposal. So who's going to handle the cost for that? Which the Harvard Business Review said that cost would almost certainly go to regulators. So it would be a government incurred cost. So that would be your tax dollars picking that up. They did not know exactly who that would be. So some further digging would be, of course, you have you have a ton of regulators at every stage is the problem. From the federal level, the Department of Energy, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on the federal level, and then you go down to the state with the Department of Environmental Conservation, the State Public Utility Commission, Public Service Commission, and a bunch of basically government bureaucracy at every level, not to mention anything locally that would essentially layer that in bureaucratic red tape. One of the noteworthy things from the Harvard Business Review was their noteworthy item that China is the biggest pusher of solar panels. And to me, that is very revealing and telling about this whole agenda, from the federal Green New Scam all the way down to what that says for national security and things like that. As I have mentioned over and over again, that China is an adversarial nation and does not care one iota about the United States at all, and has made it clear that they want to surpass the United States. But they are the biggest backers of these solar panels, and they are the ones that manufacture them, push them out, whatever the case may be. Penn State University had a similar study about the usefulness and what their recommendations were for these projects. This was in 2024. And they basically went across every stage of development and every aspect of development. So, and what they noted in their study was essentially where to put them. That one of the things they note is so that you that developers tend to avoid, and this is what they say, they tend to avoid floodplains, wetlands, any kind of rocky soil. So there's two. And third was interesting because it was sites likely to experience the average tornadoes, winds, and for us, snow loads. And so how the Adirondacks was chosen, given our tendency to have long winters, as we have had this year, and snow that is unpredictable, is beyond me. Then you move into the fourth criteria that they tend to avoid, that developers tend to avoid, is the proximity to cemeteries, golf courses, or residential neighborhoods. And I cannot speak for the ones in Ticonderoga specifically, but at least here in Moriah, we have pretty much, it is sandwiched in between two Catholic cemeteries and the golf course within a residential neighborhood. And that is not fault on anyone that would have leased the land, because they were manipulated into it anyway by the company, by these companies and those with the money. So and I'd like to, where's the Adirondack Park Agency in all of that? They do not recommend that they be released out on prime farmland. So it is encouraged that if farmland is considered, or anyone who typically owns a farm and wants to lease a portion of the land, that it be done on a basically a parcel of land that is not suitable for farming. And as far as the environmental impact, so the environmental impact for not only I would say it looks like both the human and the environmental, for whatever wildlife you have. What this Penn State study concluded is that it's unclear. They said, because they cited different government agencies like New York State's Solar Guidebook in 2020, they said, of course, that there was minimal impact. And then that's what I get forgetting about. And then the U.S. Department of Energy, that these effects are not well understood. So a mixed review there. And in Texas, what was documented was that a Fox News affiliate in Texas, that after a hailstorm came through, and it was a very powerful, it went through and damaged the solar panels, and then there was concerns after that storm about environmental damage and chemical runoff from those storms, and essentially those chemicals got into the water table after that storm, and people had to test their well water and things like that in the aftermath of that hailstorm, which we're not prone to a lot here in the Adirondacks, but they do tend to blow through on occasion. We've been known to have a few of them. So that's sort of what it looks like. And what it looks like to me is one big experiment at our expense. That to me is my own conclusion based on the evidence presented to you here, that we cannot say with certainty that there is safety in these projects, but we're going to try them out anyway, despite public risk. Now, at least for the solar panels, from this extensive study done by Penn State and things like that, there can be steps to mitigate or lessen the environmental risks and damage in the community and things like that. But even they know that there is still a negligible amount of damage done. So questions to be raised all around. when New York State does have, according to Article 1, Section 19 of the state constitution, a constitutional duty to uphold environmental protection. That was an environmental amendment that was passed by voter approval in 2021. And so that would also come into bear for our queen, Kathy Hochul, who thinks that she has absolute reign over New York State. The APA did note to the Times of Thai, or the Sun, in 2021 that when Moriah when this project had been approved, that back then their representative was concerned over the amount of solar panel or solar projects in application. At that point, this was 5 years ago now, about 5 years ago, when this article came out in the Times of Thai. And of course, the what happens is you have payment in lieu of taxes as a pilot program that comes into these town governments. That's what that article noted there, that it is a way for money to come in on these projects. And my personal take on that is that if the Adirondack Park Agency in New York State was not so oppressive in their regulation of the economy anyway, the money would not be needed. And that is no fault of anyone here, no fault of anyone locally, just again a matter of public policy discussion for debate and discourse in the public square. And on that note of debate and discourse in the public square, the best energy projects here more locally, or the renewable energy projects that are being discussed in Ticonderoga, move on with two meetings coming up, with tomorrow evening being the first of those. That is June 4th at 6 p.m. in the basement of the community building in Ticonderoga. So you won't want to, I'm going to say you won't want to miss that. Definitely, I would urge anyone in Ticonderoga to come to that meeting, or anyone in Moriah for that matter, to come to that meeting who is concerned. Crown Point, flood the room, and force them to shut it down again and make them see just how involved the public is in this matter. And then on June 11th, the regular town board meeting is at 6 p.m. in the basement in the Thai community building. And that's next Thursday. And that is, for those who don't know, 132 Montcalm Street in Ticonderoga. And the Moriah Channel will be there to cover those events as well. So that is where that stands here locally, that from the state level on down, we are not letting them get away with it. The Fort Henry Fire District here in Moriah voted to pass, with that firehouse being built that was on the public referendum yesterday, and we had covered that story extensively here. But according to our sources, it passed 167 to 56. And I put in my notes, it was the unofficial count this afternoon, but the Sun reported on that with that same number as well. I got the number directly from our Port Henry Fire Chief, Jimmy Hughes. But so by the looks of it, if the Sun reported on it, it is probably somewhat more official than that. Or than what he had told me at that point in time. But either way, barring a couple ballots or two or so, it did pass either way. And so that will move to the next stage of planning. And so a congratulations to the Port Henry Fire District on that approval for that new firehouse there. So that's all the headlines for today. And I do want to make the announcement on Friday. You won't want to miss a special commemoration for the D-Day invasion, trying to commemorate something that is not Pride Month related for the month of June, but since the June 6th anniversary of D-Day is on Friday, we will have some type of D-Day commemoration right here on the Moriah Nightly News on Friday. And of course, I can't find it here. Don't see it. And of course, the Moriah Radio Network is live as well. I thought that I had the banner picture here somewhere, but apparently, oh, there it is. There is the banner picture of our Moriah Radio Network. And you can find that with that description. That pinned post on Facebook has the link there. It is up and running, and hopefully someday we'll be live there if I can figure all that out. And I did not have a business spotlight feature, a business to feature tonight in our business spotlight, and so that is always an option to advertise with us as well. So that is the Moriah Nightly News for this Wednesday evening. Thank you for listening and watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share us on Facebook, and spread the word around town and around the region. And good night.